What is going on? Welcome to the episode. Today we're going to be digging into pre and post-workout nutrition strategies for fat loss. So we're going to establish exactly what to do with your pre and post-workout nutrition in order to maximize your fat loss results. We're also going to establish how to tell if you've eaten too little or too much pre and or post-workout, and I'm also going to share with you what I do personally from a nutrition standpoint in regards to fueling up and recovering exercise-wise. So first of all, when your goal is fat loss, the requirement is a calorie deficit. So no matter what we do with our pre and post-workout nutrition, the most important aspect to keep in mind is that everything essentially funnels through the filter of, am I in a calorie deficit? Meaning, some folks really emphasize how you need X amount of protein and Y amount of carbs within the pre and post-workout window, and how you might want to limit fats in order to speed up digestion and spike insulin and all sorts of detailed protocols, which can all have utility depending on who you are and your priorities. But when it comes to fat loss, we want to be sure not to miss the forest for the trees, in the sense that the requirement is a calorie deficit, and therefore we want to structure our day as a whole in a way that honors that first and foremost, because fat loss simply cannot take place without it. For example, let's say that your goal is fat loss and someone says, you need to eat 30 grams of protein pre and post workout and eat all of your carbs in that pre and post exercise window as well, because that's when you're the most insulin sensitive. Now, while this is technically true that you are fairly insulin sensitive around exercise, recommendations like this can actually be exactly what stop you from getting the fat loss result that you're after in a big picture context. Reason being is, let's say that you work out at 7:30 a.m. before work, and you happen to be one of those people that doesn't feel all that hungry in the morning. However, you really enjoy having a larger dinner and eating more at night. Should you consume a whole bunch of protein and carbs pre and or post-workout because that's when you're the most insulin sensitive? Absolutely not, because remember, the requirement for fat loss is a calorie deficit. And therefore, if you eat a whole bunch of food pre and post workout when you're not even that hungry, and then 8 hours later at dinner, you have this tiny little portion because, you had to eat all of that food around your workout, well, that's not setting yourself up for success in the slightest, because now you're more likely to blow your calorie budget for the day because you actually prefer to eat a larger dinner, but you forced food down around your morning workout when you weren't even hungry. This is a classic example of missing the forest for the trees, in the sense that this is emphasizing minor details that don't make much of a difference at all, instead of prioritizing the big picture, i.e., overall adherence to your calorie deficit, because that is what yields fat loss, not specifically what and how much you eat in that pre and post workout window. Now, I'm not saying that pre and post workout nutrition don't matter at all. I'm just saying that if you want the best results, you'll want to prioritize the fundamental principles in order to yield those results. It's sort of like having a social media business, and instead of focusing on putting out great content, you're hyper-focused on posting at the perfect time during the day. It's far better to have great content that you don't necessarily post at the quote-unquote optimal time versus having average content but putting it up at the quote-unquote perfect time. Because if you have subpar content, it doesn't matter when you post it. It's still not providing people with useful information, and therefore it's not going to gain the traction that you're after. Another quick example would be if you work out at night. So let's say you work out at 8 p.m. and you start your work day at 9 a.m. and you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to have a bunch of caffeine pre-workout because I want to maximize this exercise session and burn as many calories as possible, and caffeine will give me the energy to do so. Poor strategy, big picture, right? Because sure, you might be able to burn a few extra calories via increased stimulation from all that caffeine, but you're also not going to be able to get to sleep after that. And as a result, you're going to feel super tired and lethargic the next day, and you're not going to want to move much at all. And you're also more likely to make poor food decisions because you're sleep deprived. And all of a sudden, majoring in the minors and not seeing the big picture as far as what to prioritize stops you from getting the result that you ultimately want. So the moral of the story in the big scheme of things when it comes to pre and post-workout nutrition or just meal timing in general, meaning when you eat throughout the day, structure your approach in a way that makes it as likely as possible for you to adhere to your calorie deficit, because that is what yields fat loss. I don't care what time my clients eat. I don't care how many meals they eat per day. Whatever works for them and has them adhere to their personalized program, I am all for. So if they want to eat one giant meal per day because that works really well with their super busy schedule and they like that setup, great, we can accommodate that. If they want to eat 2 meals per day, we'll work with that. If they want to eat 3 meals and 3 snacks, we can do that too. I'm personally not attached to a certain protocol. I'm fully behind whatever sets my client up for success. And I'd recommend finding out what sort of meal cadence fits best for you individually and going with that. Now, having said that, let's dig into how to approach your pre and post-workout nutrition within the umbrella of a calorie deficit is required for fat loss. So do not violate that principle in any way, shape, or form in order to maximize minutia around your workout. But within that context, what should you eat or not eat pre and post exercise? Let's cover pre-workout first. Eat what has you feel and perform your best for that given workout. So that could be a small meal, a moderate meal, a large meal, whatever has you feel great heading into exercise. A few signs that you've eaten too little could be things like lightheadedness, dizziness, low blood sugar, outright hunger, obviously. You want stable energy throughout your workout, so fuel appropriately based on that. A few signs that you've eaten too much are an overly full stomach, feeling lethargic, acid reflux when you start exercising, difficulty breathing is another biggie, and also just feeling weighed down because you either ate too much and or too close to your session. Now, if you prefer a lighter meal before you work out, you're likely going to want to eat a little bit closer to that session timing-wise, and if you prefer a larger meal, you're going to want to give yourself a little more time to digest. You also don't have to eat at all. I've worked out fasted for years, so I've typically just had coffee in the morning, done some work, and hit the gym, and just eaten a larger meal post-workout. So by no means do you have to eat. This stuff is highly individual, and just do what has you feel and perform your best. A question that typically pops up on the back end of that is, are you going to lose muscle if you don't eat right before and or after your workout? And simply put, no. The body is far more efficient and resilient than that, fortunately. Now let's dig into the post-workout portion. So your post-workout nutrition is likely going to depend somewhat on your pre-workout meal, just because if you had a big meal pre-workout, you may not be all that hungry for a bit after your session. Also, exercise does a great job of blunting appetite. So if you're not hungry for an hour or 2, possibly more after your workout, that's totally fine. There's no need to force food down because remember, a calorie deficit is priority number 1. And so eating when you're not hungry is completely counterproductive. So just eat when your body is ready for nutrition. On the other hand, if you ate lighter pre-workout or you didn't eat at all, you're probably going to be hungry a little bit sooner, which in that case, eat. Now let's address the what. So what foods are best to eat pre and post-workout? Fortunately, the answer is super simple and it's the same as any other time. Single ingredient whole foods, ideally that you cook yourself. There's no need to get fancy food choice-wise pre or post-workout. And I'd recommend leaning towards whole food over things like protein powders and meal replacement shakes because whole food on a calorie per calorie basis is going to keep you far more satiated. And satiation is the name of the game when it comes to fat loss because it helps you adhere to priority number one, a calorie deficit. How many times can I say that in this episode? Okay, so specifics. Lean meat, fish, seafood, low-fat dairy if you tolerate it, fruit, veggies, starches like rice, potatoes, yams, even bread and pasta if you digest it well. Literally the exact same foods that you would eat at any other time during the day. And I know that bread and pasta aren't technically single ingredient foods, but I think that they're totally fine to include in your nutrition program. And as long as my clients digest them well, I include them in theirs as well. So you don't need to get these fancy, fast digesting proteins or carbs. Just eat normally because you're probably not a 250-pound bodybuilder that's prepping for a contest that just had a grueling workout session. Those folks have different requirements and priorities and drug considerations, to put it bluntly. Now I want to share with you what I do personally pre and post workout in regards to my nutrition, and typically I've had two different setups depending on what time I work out as of late. Setup number one is if I work out earlier in the day. So lately I've been waking up pretty early, usually around 5:30 a.m., and so I always have a tall glass of water and a couple cups of coffee first thing. And then if I'm going to work out around 8 or 9 a.m., I either won't eat anything or I'll have a small bowl of fruit, which yesterday was a banana and some grapes with cinnamon and a little bit of salt on it. Post-workout, I'll have a hefty serving of protein with some starchy carbs, veggies, and a little bit of fat. And yesterday, that looked like some chicken breast with white rice, zucchini, carrots, coconut milk, and a sprinkle of salt and pepper to taste. So on days like this, I typically eat two larger meals and either fast in the morning or have that portion of fruit like I mentioned. Now, if I work out a little bit later, so around 10 or 11 a.m., I've actually been having a little bit of a breakfast, which is pretty new to me because if you've been following me for a while, you know that I haven't really eaten much of a breakfast for years. So this is something kind of new. On these days, I'll usually have a lean and light protein source, like a whole egg with some egg whites, a small amount of veggies, and then that same bowl of fruit. So in both scenarios, I'm keeping it quite light because I feel a lot better working out with less food in me versus more. My post-workout meal is usually the same more or less, so if it is chicken, rice, veg, and coconut milk, I'll just go a little bit lighter on the chicken and rice because I had a proper breakfast, and that's really the only difference. So when I fast or just have fruit pre-workout, I have a larger lunch and dinner. And when I go for protein and fruit pre-workout, I'll have a slightly smaller lunch and dinner. The total calories are the same in both scenarios for the day. It's just that they're distributed slightly differently timing-wise due to scheduling. That's it. Hypothetically, if I worked out in the afternoon, which I rarely if ever do, I'd likely do more or less the same thing, just allow a little bit more time to digest lunch before I worked out. And if I worked out in the evening, I would probably split my dinner meal into two smaller meals, just because I find that if I eat too much too close to bed, it really messes with my sleep. This is very common, and so I wouldn't recommend eating large portions too close to bedtime. That's why a lot of folks experience the night sweats. So if that's you, I'd recommend moving your dinner to earlier in the evening. So that's pre and post workout nutrition in a nutshell. And as you can see, I don't do anything fancy with my clients and I don't do anything fancy personally. So I'd recommend prioritizing your calorie deficit by setting yourself up for success throughout your day as a whole versus zooming in too much and hyper-focusing on the pre- and post-workout window, because we don't want to miss the forest for the trees, being that the priority is fat loss. And therefore, the key is overall adherence and consistency over time, i.e. days, weeks, and months. If you're interested in applying for one-on-one nutritional coaching and or workout design with me, you can click the link in the description below or head on over to n1fitness.com/coaching. Follow me up on Instagram at N1Fitness, on TikTok at the N1Fitness, and feel free to friend me on Facebook at Marcus Sadu. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much to the folks that have taken an extra 15 to 30 seconds out of their day to leave a review on their favorite podcast platform. I truly appreciate you because that's what helps this pod grow and reach more folks with this information. And lastly, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope that you found this useful, and I will catch you on the next episode. See ya!